Just get up every morning and be grateful you're alive, even if it doesn't feel like it. If you're still a victim living with abuse, be grateful for the small things. There's a roof over your head. There's a price you're paying for it, but there's a roof over your head. The ability to have food and do the best you can to take care of your children. I know the family courts don't ever look at the victim as providing the best they can, but they are. They're keeping those kids alive. And so get up every morning, take a deep breath, be grateful for what you have, and put one foot in front of the other. Some point in time, it will be better. And if you need us, we're all here for you. You are not alone in this fight, in this struggle.
That's right. And I am echoing that. You are not alone. You do not have to suffer alone. You are not alone. Speak up and you will receive.